Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Cleantech Lithium Investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged as usual and can be submitted at any time using the Q&A tab just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Just type in your questions at any time and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all questions submitted today and we'll publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform. As usual, we'd like to submit the following poll, and I'm sure the company will be most grateful for your participation. I'd now like to hand over to Daniel Fox-Davies. Good afternoon.
Mark, good evening and thank you. And welcome everybody to another one of our bi-weekly investor updates. Just to refresh, the intent of these was to give a generic overview of different aspects of activity and milestones that are going to be key in the company's transition from doing exploration and development work into becoming a producing lithium company. So we've previously gone over some of the drilling activities, we've gone over some of the licensing issues, and we'd intended this evening to go over project finance and how a company such as Cleantech goes about attracting the project finance that we need to actually build up and develop the asset into producing asset. However, as is always the case, events come around, and there was a significant update last week from the Chilean government about their national lithium strategy. And on the back of that, the company had an extremely positive and interesting meeting with the government just the other day. And so I thought before we launch into the conversation with both Steve and with Gordon about the project financing and developing, I thought it'd be quite useful, Steve, maybe if you could just go over what the announcement was again last week, just for those that didn't maybe see it, and then reiterate and maybe just go through in a little bit more depth about the announcement that you put out this morning as an RNS.
Okay, very happy to do that, Dan. I think the thing which is very, very positive for us is that there is now a time frame and a process for the award of the sales. As you all know, we submitted the sales for both Laguna Verde and Francisco Basin last September, encouraged by branches of government to do so. But we were told by the Ministry of Mining that they wouldn't be able to process that until they finished their analysis of which salars are going to have environmental protection and not be able to be exploited in the future. That process has now been completed at the end of March, and the government has announced what you can see on this slide as the overall process. And what we have decided to do as a company is not to keep the waters muddied by trying to have a separate process with government when the government wants everybody to go through one administrative process. So we have withdrawn our sale applications and will be resubmitting it in accordance with this schedule which the government has put in place. And basically what it's saying is that having defined all of the salars in Chile, there are two which are considered strategic, which is Atacama and Maracunga, where there will be majority government control in the operating and development of those. Then there are 6 salars, 1 Pedernales with Codelco, and 5 others with Anami, where those state companies will be looking to attract in private investors and structure a JV in some manner to develop those projects into the future. There are then 27 salars comprising just over 30% of the land area of salars, which are going into an environmental study to determine whether they will be protected from exploitation in the future. And then there are another 26 salars which the government is saying are open for the development by private companies, either private companies alone, or they can invite in state participation to a minority extent as well. And clearly, our 2 projects, Laguna Verde and Francisco Basin, are in the 26 salars to be developed by the private sector. The process is in April. The government will be issuing a form inviting expressions of interest to develop those salars. There's a period where companies can ask questions. They'll receive answers back from government, and then they can formalize their expression of interest. And basically, we've already done that with our SAOL application, but we will make a couple of tweaks to it and resubmit it in accordance with this process. After the governments receive those expressions of interest, then during July, they will analyze those expressions and determine how to go forward with the assignment of SAOLs. Now, clearly, if there is only one applicant per salar, it's easy. The government will then decide whether there is a requirement to have a consultation with any indigenous communities living around that area. If there is, that's going to be quite an extensive program. In our particular case, we don't believe there will be any other applicants on our areas because we are already an advanced project and we have the mining licenses on both of our projects, which gives us very good security to be able to develop our projects. We also have had dialogue with our indigenous communities over the last 2 years, and that led to the signing of an alliance agreement in early December last year, when the indigenous communities expressed their support for Cleantech Lithium in the development of our projects because of the sustainable nature of the technology we're going to be using, which is DLE with reinjection of the brine. The communities recognize that lithium will be developed in Chile, and they want to see it done in the most sustainable way. And we have shown them how it can be done. So they've been very vocal in informing government how supportive they are of Cleantech Lithium's projects and wish to see those SAOLs awarded to Cleantech Lithium as soon as possible. So we don't believe there will be a need for any extensive dialogue again. Then,
so, Steve, sorry, Kerry.
Then the government, following that dialogue with indigenous communities, will draft a decree, a SAOL decree, with all the terms and conditions applying to that specific project, which will be the area of interest, the financial returns for government, any specific environmental issues, and any other issues which will go into that contract. If there are, not with us, but there could be on other salars, more than one expression of interest, in which case the government will define a mechanism for determining who to award that SAOL to, and again, there's a time frame to do that, and all of it leading to the signing of the SAOL. Our expectation is that the government will pass our expression of interest in July through to the assignment of SAOL. We'll go into the maybe very, very fast assessment that we do not need additional dialogue with community. There'll be the drafting of the SAOL and the signing of the SAOL. So we would expect a 3-month term beyond the July timeframe. So we think this is a much clearer path. I think it's very positive for us. Certainly, we are the most advanced project in Chile. The government has said that they wished, originally, the Minister Marcel said they wish to see 3 or 4 new projects in production in 2006. I think they've rode back a little bit from that, recognizing that's a very fast time frame. and saying 3 or 4 projects being developed by 2026. And clearly, as the most advanced, we should be able to get to that position faster than anybody else, which will fit the government's objectives very, very well.
So, Steve, the way I read this, obviously, it's great for the company now that you have some clarity from the government about the mechanism and the procedure, whereas before it was a little bit sort of up in the air. And also, I had some investors on the line earlier today who were just asking about the sort of the withdrawal and resubmission and concerns about the time. But my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the new national lithium strategy has defined certain areas like consultation, and obviously, since you've put the sails in, you've done extensive further works on the ground, and we have the current drilling program going on. So my understanding is that you're just going to have to update the application to reflect the additional work that's already happened, the agreements with the local communities, what work you've been doing on the drilling, the pilot plant, etc. So it's more of an update and a resubmission to meet the updated criteria that the government wants to see as part of this overall process.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Dan. And during this this period of the first 2 months of asking questions, receiving responses, we don't need that. We'll just update both our applications and file them at the end of that June timeframe for the government to then assess and take them forward.
Dan, if I could just step in there, one thing that's been very good about this process is up until we met the minister or the ministry in late November. The board were there in Chile, and we met them, and actually they said they were going to go through this process and announce before the end of March. So we walked out the meeting thinking, well, government end of March? I don't think so, but they delivered on that. I mean, there's a real drive within Chile now to get this process moving. They've been hearing it's taken a year since the national lithium strategy was announced. So clearly there's been a message from the president to get on with this. And with Argentina catching up fast, there's definitely a drive in Chile to move projects forward. And I think the message is private companies are welcome. Please come and move the projects forward. And we're well placed to do that. So I think when we look at this timeline, I think they're genuinely intending to meet this timeline, which is something we didn't have the week before last, a timeline like this. So this is good for us.
Great. So last week they made the announcement, and then again, my understanding, I was only from what's happening there, but then Aldo went in and had a meeting the other day. So you just want to touch on, Steve, on who he met with. And I understand we're one of the very first companies to be invited in by the government for a face-to-face chat about how we take this forward.
Yeah, the government announced this administrative process on Wednesday, and then called Aldo to please come in for a meeting on Thursday, so that they could explain the process to Aldo. We then discussed the withdrawal of the sale applications from the previous regime and get it coherent with this administrative process. I think the overall mood was that we are so far in advance of any other project, and being very supportive of the national lithium strategy, that they are very keen to move us quickly into the sale approval process.
And just the attendees was the sub-secretary who reports directly to the mining ministry. So it's number 2 basically in the mining ministry, with 2 of the senior lawyers and a lithium specialist. So we had our lawyer in, plus our community relations lady as well. So it was a good meeting, good hour-and-a-half meeting, and we were very pleased with the way it went.
And is that the same community relations woman who used to actually work for the ministry? Because you have another lady on the staff, don't you, who used to...
Carolina, no. This was Marcela Sepulveda, who is community relations up in the Copiapó region, and say very, very well connected with the local communities.
Excellent. Well, hopefully, we look forward to getting an announcement for the resubmission. But I think that's extremely positive all around, because obviously it was the announcement from the government that caused such a sharp sell-off last year and a lot of the confusion. And then the concerns about what was going to be happening on the ground. So hopefully this provides some clarity and bring back some confidence overall.
So news that shareholders can be looking for is during July will be the announcement by the government of the where there's been expressions of interest for SOLARs and those that will be moved forward and which will receive priority attention. And our thinking is that Cleantech Lithium will be top of that list.
Yeah, very good.
Daniel, there's a question there, maybe poignant to ask at this stage because it's about SEAL. Is that worth asking?
Yeah, I was gonna time after the sale is issued. I was gonna probably come back to a lot of the questions at the end just to make sure that we get through everything, Gordon. Otherwise, we have a habit on, and I wanted to get us on to your section on the financing. But do we have another slide on the sales there, or is that
that's finished?
Right. Okay. I will come back to all the questions at the end, and then we'll deal with them as they come in. But I did want to make sure we got forward through the sections. Let me just share for 1 second. All right. So the thing was addressed here. We have a number of questions over time from various partners saying, how does a small cap junior company go about funding a multi-million-dollar, hundreds of million dollars development program? And I thought it'd be very useful to have both Gordon as the company's CFO outline how those mechanisms would work. And then I was going to ask, Steve and I spent a lot of time together, obviously, over the years, and Steve went through a very similar project, very similar financing of another project in Chile. And I thought it'd be quite good to address that. But before we did that, just for one moment, I was just going to bring this up out of interest. So 1 second. Right. So one of the interesting, so this is where our stock price has been over the last year. Let me just bring this back to a shorter time frame here for 6 months. Give Bloomberg for a second. So obviously we start off with the rest of the market. I'm just overlaying at the moment. This is the lithium price. We're starting to see a tick back up coming through here in the lithium price. And this is how we're comparing with some peer groups. So I just chose a couple of companies here, which is one of the interesting ones here in Lake. That's also sort of had the same sort of problems with the market. Now, SQM, which is now, Steve, SQM is one of the companies that's they're in the strategic SOLARs?
Yes, SQM is one of the two companies with Albemarle, which is producing lithium from the Salar de Atacama, and SQM is the largest producer.
Okay, so I've just normalized it here around to 100. And then, but interestingly, I was just to bring up an overlay of, this is Vulcan Energy, who are looking at DLE in Germany. Actually, I'll take off there. And they've recently, I'll get Gordon, they recently announced some financing about a month and a half ago, and you can see how they started to recover quite significantly in their price, rising back from 70 closer to 96 today. On the back of that, Gordon, you saw that announcement.
Yeah, they've been looking to bring their construction finance together over a period of time, and actually they've been working. You'll see this in our presentation later on. They've been working with some of the investment banks in Europe, and the EIB, the European Investment Bank, has put in the better part of $1 billion into the company to support their work program going over the next 3-4 years. So that plus German government support as well has seen a big kick in their share price, and they've recovered on the back of the funding moving forward. And I'll talk you through what our plans are. We're going to mirror a lot of what they're doing in either Europe or in America, but I'll walk you through that and how we're doing that.
Okay, brilliant. Right, Mark, could I bring us back up the presentation? Thank you. So, guys, how do we go about trying to build a multi-$100 million project in the middle of Chile?
Okay. Okay. I mean, it's a pretty standard route in terms of how do you finance major projects, and this is generic, where you've got on the left there, you've got equity at different levels. You see that equity at company level, that tends to be in the early stages of projects as they're moving forward through their various guises. And, we've seen that with Cleantech, with various placements and so on. When you start looking at the project finance and you're actually moving to a point where you are discussing with serious entities about working on your funding, you're really looking at bringing equity in at project level. Companies like to invest, particularly at project level, for various reasons, because debt is usually put in at the project level and the security on the projects and so on. So equity at that level, there's a number of examples where entities have come in for 10, 15, 20% stake and, you know, put some pretty serious money on the table to get a seat at the table, and also to have an influence on the process going forward, and also to bring the capital finance. And what's a driver? It's accessing product, it's securing supply, and I'll show you later on who's playing in that space. I mean, you talk car companies and battery manufacturers, etc. But there's a well-trodden path, particularly in Chile, and Steve's been there before, where parties who wish to have offtake or supply will put money up front to get a place at the table. And that, you know, that sometimes can come at a 10% stake, with an option to increase to 25%. For example, we saw that recently in Canada, where I'm trying to think who it was Mitsubishi did a deal in Canada, got a 10% stake in it with the option of increasing that to 25%. So that is when, you know, you start getting some serious equity money in play. And what you're doing is you're effectively, yes, you are diluting at the project level, but you're doing that on the basis of money coming into the project level. So the corporate level is kept cleaner. Now, that doesn't mean someone can't come in at the top level. It depends on what the entity's driver is. But at this stage, certainly some of the conversations we've had over the past year and a half, and indicative conversations with entities who would look to be coming in at the project level. And Steve will give you an example of that later on, as to how he did that, associate with that. I mean, one of the drivers of having these entities is they can also bring their balance sheet to bear in terms of supporting debt finance. And what you see there on number 3 there is it's fundamentally a large part of this project, given its cash flow is very cash flow positive from day one. It'll sustain quite significant bank funding, and there is bank funding for, in particular, projects of this nature, which is seen as critical minerals. You've seen the fact, you've just seen that with Vulcan. And actually, what's interesting about bank funding is not just necessarily pure bank funding; it's the import-export credit agencies. We'll give you an example later on of a real proposal, you know, an indicative proposal we've had, for pretty significant money. And these are agencies in Europe and elsewhere who support, sometimes driven by government, support companies like ourselves or small companies to provide product and effectively product into those countries. For example, Germany, Sweden, Italy, and so on. So a large part of this project funding in any sort of mining project will be in the 2 key areas. But what has changed is, I'm going to move on to another slide, is this is quite a small slide, so I'll just talk you through it. This is not necessarily, we've talked about strategic players here, and just to give you an example who the strategic players are, I'll flip to the next slide and come back to it, is car companies. I think we've mentioned before in the last couple of years, car manufacturers have never really played in the buying product stage. They usually use a third party to trade and so on. That's changed because of the nature of what's going on here. Critical minerals, and particularly with China securing such a large percentage of the supply, means that car companies are scrabbling around trying to find sources of supply so that they can stay in the game and access critical minerals, in particular lithium and other products, to secure supply. So you've seen Ford, you've seen GM, you've seen VW, Tesla, and so on start to look around at securing supply, and that would be even with companies directly with us or through other third parties. Big battery manufacturers, CATL is the biggest battery manufacturer in the world, by a long way, Chinese. They've actually done deals with entities in the States recently, so they're a provider of batteries. And then there's other ones like LG and so on in other countries. So battery manufacturers, again, looking at supply. More historically, the commodity traders like to trade, they like to secure supply and then pass it on to whoever they think can get the best deal. You've got your Trafiguras, Mitsubishi, and you've seen Glencore coming into play recently as well. And they're taking equity stakes in companies as a means of securing that access. And they'll look at offtake, so take an equity stake, 10, 15, 20%, for offtake, and the offtake you can negotiate it from there, and that could be over a number of years, or it could be over a period, or a percentage of the offtake.
Gordon, sorry, one of the questions that comes up, but an offtake would be at spot, because some people ask the question is how much of a discount would the offtake be at? But my understanding is that, you know, most of these offtake agreements are at market. You're not doing a fixed long-term pricing. The benefit for the offtake is they just want the certainty of the supply, or the commodity trader is looking to make the selling market margin that they want on it.
Yeah, that's. I think probably best. Why don't you answer this, Steve? Because you've been there before on the copper.
Yeah. Lithium is a bit different to metals like copper and nickel, where there is an end market and the London Metal Exchange. Traditionally, lithium pricing has been negotiated directly between the owner, the miner, and the user, as a contract in tons and a negotiated price. But as the volume of lithium business has been increasing in the last few years, and there's been a growing spot market, what you're now finding is that those contract prices are being heavily influenced by spot pricing, and there will be probably that will remain a long-term contract price influenced by spot price, and part of your production will go on the spot market as well. So the contract nature does remain. In the copper business, they're selling copper concentrate. You fix the tonnage that you sell, and there's an annual negotiation on treatment and refining charges, but you will use the 3-month copper price. So there's all sorts of different mechanisms. Lithium is going from contract; it's being influenced by spot, and that will only develop more in the future.
Well, a development last week, Daniel, was for the first time I think ever in Australia, Albemarle and SQM separately did an auction for 10,000 tons, and they auctioned it and got the price through that route. So the market is changing. I mean, and those are the two of the biggest lithium providers in the world, producers.
You don't remember what was the price they got for that auction?
$13,000-$14,000 a ton. Some of it was spot, you mean, but if you equivalent, it was about $13,000-$14,000 a ton.
Okay, so looking here at the funding strategy, if we just go to 120,000 ton a year plant, what's the current thinking? I know these numbers move around as part of the PFS and the DFS, which we discussed in one of the former webinars, but internally at the moment, you're thinking that's going to be roughly.
Well, let me finish this now. I'll take you through that, because the final bit of the equation is new players who've been entering the market in the last two to 3 years, and in fact the last year. Rio Tinto, these are industry players now who we would be looking to talk to strategically, and then there's even the oil and gas companies, your Exxon coming into play, Chevron, and so on. So the market is, and the strategics have changed. So going back to the previous slide, fundamentally we will be talking. I mean, what's going to drive this process is, from our perspective, is reserves announcement, the PFS complete in third quarter, and product from the pilot plant. I can't underestimate the importance of the product from the pilot plant, because that is product that will be sent to all of the above, all of those companies, and we've got a long list of people we'll be sending it to, and it'll start in low volumes, and then as people take interest, it'll grow, and we've got the capacity to deliver on that. It's about, this is a product we've got. Do you want to play? And that's where the conversations happen. As I say, we've had I think we've got 5 entities under NDA. Some have been under NDA for a couple of years, some less. So in fact, one's only just a couple of weeks ago. And these are entities all in that strategic box, some of them in the list below. And we'll tentative conversations. They've been watching. We've had a couple to site, and what we'll do is we'll start proper conversations with strategic parties in quarter 3, towards the end of quarter 3, as we've got product and so on. So the dynamics changes. Small company, but with a product that people want. And then that suddenly you're into conversations with the banks that are linked to them, and importantly as well, the Import-Export Credit Agency. So what we're looking to do through all of this, as you go from left to right, is an important point there you mentioned is what are we going to raise? We're estimating, the PFS will have the number of what the capital cost of the project was. To remind you, it was $380 million in the scoping study. Inflation and changes to the dynamics will probably take that to 450 million. But it's probably important to say that doesn't necessarily mean we have to raise 450 million. I mean, who's going to be delivering the power to the site? Is that going to be a power purchase company? Because they'll fund that themselves, and then you pay through the tariff. So there's suddenly 50 million off your capex or more. And then another thing is the conversation, early stage conversations we've been having with certain parties about they'll provide the facilities, maybe as modular facilities up to a certain level, free of charge initially, and then you pay through other means. So of that 450 million, it won't necessarily mean we have to raise that. It'll all be part of a wider package of a jigsaw piece pulling this together. And then we shouldn't underestimate the importance of the Inflation Reduction Act in the States and the European Critical Minerals Act, both of which are offering funding to parties. You've seen that in Germany with Vulcan, offering funding to support bringing product in to help indigenous companies. So, for example, the IRA is offering funds. So if we were to align ourselves with a US party or a partner through some commercial arrangement, that suddenly brings us into play with Chile being a free trade agreement country as well. So we'll continue to look at the IRA in terms of what that can bring in terms of funding. There's trillions of dollars in there for that. And then the European as well, UK government. I mean, even the UK government's an option for us. They put 25 million into Cornish Lithium, but it depends if we were to bring supply into the UK, that could change the dynamics. So all of that will be part of the equation. And then you move again to the right. You move into the ESG funding. There's trillions of dollars sitting in funds that are looking for ESG projects, and you have to tick an awful lot of boxes to do that. That's why we have an ESG program, sustainability reports, and so on. But we're doing everything we can to at least be in a position to potentially access those funds. And then finally on the right, there's equity. And I say equity tends to be at project level, but that'll the nature of that will be depending on all of the previous analysis. And then I mentioned in that slide there, the Q3 and Q4 is when we really move into this big stage with a robust PFS. Steve mentioned that in the last seminar that he gave. The PFS, if you've got a good PFS, you're suddenly in a game with these entities, and the product is the key. The pilot plant is something, and again, remember, there's not many companies with a pilot plant scale we've got, so we are in a position now we can bring product into the market and have some really robust conversations with all of those entities. And then just the final two final slides. It's probably worth mentioning that we have, as a board, extensive experience of raising projects, whether it was Steve, and I'll let Steve explain what he did on Collahuasi. Aldo has done 3 solar plants with 800 megawatts. I've raised well over $1 billion in funding for oil and gas projects. And Maha, we brought her on the board for many reasons, but one of which is her experience in offtake contracts in China and elsewhere in South America. $100 million plus contracts for Trafigura. So, and with Tommy and Johnny, we've got a board there who's delivered on major projects. And I'll pass you over to Steve in a second. I'll just finalize. In fact, I'll pass you over to Steve now, because Steve's also going to talk about this in context with funding of Collahuasi, and this is a proposal we've already had.
Steve, just before you launch in there, sorry, can I just throw in, just for people getting a sense, I just wanted to bring up actually on this one, because I think Gordon's comment about Vulcan is very, very apt. I just wanted to go back, and I was just looking at it earlier today. So Vulcan is now sitting at around about a £230 million company. But at the time that it raised its financing, it was backed out at 100 million, which is where we were just before. And this is the headline here. So they're looking at getting a 500 million loan from the European Investment Bank at the time that their market cap was about 100. So that's just where we were back before the collapse in. So, and that's part of a 1.8 billion package that they're putting together. So our financing package for clean tech is really significantly much less than many of our peer groups are trying to go through in other parts of the world. So I think it's very achievable and very doable. I just wanted to make the point that we're not doing anything that it is particularly out of norms with the rest of the industry or is being faced by any other parties. Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, okay. I'll give you an example. Okay, we did the finance of Escondida, and then I was the CEO of the Collahuasi project to get through its feasibility studies, permitting, financing, and into construction.
Sorry, Steve. Just for people who may not be aware, Escondida is the world's largest copper mine, and Collahuasi is the world's second largest copper mine.
Yeah. So at that time, the demand for copper concentrate was just like the demand for lithium is today. The smelters in Asia and Europe couldn't get enough, so they were very anxious to source supply. Our project at Collahuasi was a $1.75 billion financing for that. And we were approached by a number of parties in Japan. They wanted delivery of concentrate to the Japanese smelter pool, and in Germany to Norddeutsche Affinerie. Two of the largest Japanese companies, Nippon Mining and Mitsui, big trading house, said, look, we want to come in at the project level. We will buy 12% of your project level equity, pay you very well for it. But in exchange, we want a long-term offtake contract for the concentrate. And if you give us that contract as part of the debt financing portion, which was over $1 billion, we will provide debt off their own balance sheet. But then we will mobilize Jexim Bank, which is the import credit bank, which supports Japanese industry, and their relationship commercial banks in Japan to make a big contribution to that debt financing. And exactly the same in Germany, on the back of delivering concentrate to Norddeutsche Affinerie, a consortium of German banks, together with KfW, which is the multilateral bank in Germany, provided again a big chunk of the debt financing, and that's the model that's been used in many projects in Chile, and I can see a very similar model being used with our particular project, bringing in a strategic, a large company that's got very strong balance sheet, because clearly, when you're doing debt financing, you need to be able to demonstrate good parent guarantees for repayment of that debt. Coming in, paying for the equity, mobilizing their commercial banks and the multilaterals in their region to support the debt finance for the project, and that's quid pro quo for taking a big part of the offtake. Now, we've already had discussions with one of the parties I used at Collahuasi was KfW. Now, KfW are charged with supporting German industry. Generally, it's been on export credit finance on equipment and services that Germany sells, but more recently on import credit finance for critical materials which German industry needs. Now, German motor car and battery plants need lithium. So KfW presented us a proposal of what they would be able to do for our particular project. Now, we're looking at production of about 20,000 tons a year of lithium carbonate. They say if you could provide 8,000 of that to a German motor manufacturer or a battery plant, or split between two of them for a period of 8 years, so a 64,000 ton contract at your long-term price of 22,500, that's $1.4 billion contract. They can provide 25% of the contract value as potential debt finance for the construction of the project. That's $350 million just from KfW alone. And there are similar import credit schemes in Italy, France, Sweden, which are moving ahead with their battery plants and motor industry. They need to secure lithium supply. The United States is a bit different. There's no direct import credit scheme as there is with KfW, but in the United States there is a requirement under the Inflation Reduction Act that by 2026, 80% of the minerals going into batteries, particularly lithium, need to come from within the US or free trade agreement countries. We know there's not enough lithium supply in the United States, so they're looking outside. Currently, the only FTA country is Chile. So that forces the motor manufacturers and the battery manufacturers to source IRA-compliant material. And that's where we're looking at having discussions to come in as potential strategic partners. They would get IRA support, which they could then apply into our particular project. So it's an indirect support through the IRA funding.
Steve, can I just sort of hold you there for 1 second, just to back up a little bit? I just wanted to also, can you just go back and your direct role at Escondida and Collahuasi was your position that you held at both those projects?
At Escondida, I was seconded by Rio Tinto to BHP to look at what we could do with the business. I was vice president business development and was responsible for motivating and leading the expansion of Escondida from its startup of 300,000 tons a year up to its 1 million ton a year. And then I left at that time. I was asked to become the first CEO of Collahuasi to bring that into production.
Which was a similar large-scale project financing as Escondida.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just thought I think it's quite important that the audience understands how directly involved you were in bringing both those large-scale, major world-class projects into production in terms of putting all of these different component parts together. And the other one is, obviously, as Gordon mentioned, there's a number of parties that are in the data room, and there are a number of discussions, some high level, some more detailed in terms of potential financing from all of those different partners. There are some Americans, Europeans, obviously Aldo and Maha went to China, and I know there's some very high level discussions for that, but this is an actual proposal that the company got. This is one example of an actual proposal that the company got. This
is an actual written proposal from KfW, yes.
Yeah, from they were done, and they were down on site. What was it, a few months ago now?
We actually met them in December in Santiago. They were there, actually supporting the German industry in Santiago. So the timing was good. So and you know, I mean, we can't go into detail on absolutely everything, but there are a number of other parties that are either in the data rooms into site, and this is why I don't think some of the investors really and our shareholders sort of took on board how important the pilot plant was and the scale of the pilot plant, because a proposal like this from KfW is dependent upon entering into a contract with a German car manufacturer or Italian car manufacturer. Not for KfW, but you know, for the same thing, the Italian one. But that comes from the ability to have this ton a month and start producing that in the coming weeks, and then be able to ship that to these various parties so that they can do the lab work and be comfortable that our lithium meets their requirements, is then what then puts them in a position to say, yes, we want this product. Yes, it's battery grade. Yes, there's low impurities. We've done all of our benchmark testing. We've done all of our long-term lab testing. We can make some small-scale batteries and test them for the various characteristics that we require for our particular usage. And that is then what leads into being able to trigger something with a KfW. It's probably best you come from Steve. You want that one?
Yeah, absolutely. No, we intend to send the first batch of Eluate product, from our DLE plant. As we've explained before, we are only doing the DLE and the first stage of Eluate concentration in Chile. We are then sending that concentrated Eluate to an existing conversion facility in Chicago, which is run by Conductive Energy and Forward Water. And they will do the final polishing and conversion to battery-grade lithium carbonate. And we'll send in batches of just under a ton. And that product is to start off those conversations. The battery manufacturers, they initially want a few kilos sampled to look at the chemistry of the material. Then, if that's all okay, they'll want tens of kilos to start testing the physical characteristics, of the material. Does it suit their process? And if that's all fine, then they will want hundreds of kilos to be able to put into their test battery manufacturing line to demonstrate that it all works well in their process. And we will be doing that with multiple people, but certainly with the first batch that we plan to send very, very soon to Chicago, we can start that process of the chemical analysis with potential off-takers.
And you're happy with how the pilot plant's running since you commissioned it? All going to plan?
Yeah, we commissioned it with the Sunresin engineers from Purotech. Been running brine through it and getting the eluate out. As we said before, the lithium concentration in the brine is just under 200 parts per million lithium. The expected concentration of lithium in the eluate is about 600 parts per million. We expect to get 90% at least recovery of lithium from the brine, and reject the impurities in the brine. More than 99% of the impurities of calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium is rejected by the resin, doesn't get through to the eluate. The initial indications are that the lithium concentration is much as we expect, and we've measured the sodium coming through, and it's very, very low indeed. Now, we're still doing the optimization. We still need to do full analysis of the various streams, but so far it is going well. The next part is to do the concentration through reverse osmosis to about 4,000 parts per million lithium, and that we then ship to Chicago, put it in a tank, in a container, send it on the boat to Los Angeles, truck to Chicago, and then it goes into the plant there.
I'm very cognizant of time, and I know we've run over in the past, so we'll ship forward. We're getting some questions, and I want to address all of them at the end. So thank you, Steve. That's very, very useful, and I think the KfW indicative of and again, gentlemen, just to clarify, this is indicative. The company hasn't taken anything. It's one of what we hope will be several offers as we go forward, and the company will then look at what is, or it may well be that this is a part, and then there is some financing from an off-taker, there is some construction financing from somebody else, there is some pre-material sort of financing from somebody else, and those are all the component parts that come together. But Gordon, let me let you please get back to the slide presentation, and then we'll address the questions at the end.
I think we're just about done, actually. We've gone through really the gist. I think just to summarize, we're entering an interesting phase now, where 2 years of work with all the drilling and the analysis, and in basically 15 months from ordering the pilot plant to getting it properly up and running. It's all coming together quite nicely now in terms of, we'll have the new drilling campaign results out in mid-year. That'll then feed into the PFS. And there's a huge amount of work going on behind the scenes on PFS. We're seeing study reports. Can't say what study reports arriving. We've got about 5 or 6 entities, specialists, looking at power, water, marketing, location, and a lot of things. And actually, it's a really interesting process as you start reading these reports of where they're actually looking at how do we really drive this project and shape it in the right way, and looking at economics. Is it better to do this instead of that? So it's shaping up really nicely. So the PFS is a priority for this year, along with the pilot. but we're moving nicely towards these conversations with parties, and we've got Aldo's meeting another party in Chile on Friday, who could easily fit into the bracket of strategic. So, and again, that was a company that approached us. So, interesting times, and I think we would expect more and more approaches as the year goes by, and then it's a question of how do we best shape this funding program, and there'll be a lot of give and take, and hopefully we'll be in a good negotiating position if we can evidence a product that people want.
And I think one of the things, obviously, is that I helped introduce CATL well over a year and a bit ago through some relations we had and some of the other parties. But as you send product out to these various parties and they express interest, they've got relationships with other funding parties, and then it begins to escalate and snowball, and then you get a bit of competitive tension. But gentlemen, I think it's incredibly good news on the clarification of the Chilean national lithium strategy. There's always been just a little bit of who was actually going to be holding the ball. And it's great the fact that the company was invited in last week, and then we now have a clearer roadmap in terms of how we actually get to the sales, and I think that'll be a matter of going forward. But let's just look at some of these questions then, and thank you, Gordon. That was very enlightening in running through. Let's go back to the beginning. So, Steve, there's a question here after the timeline. So once the sale is issued, what is the timeline then? You get a form. Is it publicly announced in a gazette, or how is that announced out? And is there a timeline that you've got then to actually start action, or what's the usual process?
The usual process is once you've signed, it will be made public. Obviously, as a listed entity, we will declare that. But in Chile, the government will want to declare who they've awarded sales to. Within the sale, it is normal to put certain terms and conditions, that there would be the expectation to be in production within a certain period of time. We don't know what that period will be, but it's really much more in excess of what will be required to do the financing and the construction. But the government will like to see a commitment to a time frame there.
And just on that as well, the next steps, effectively, once you have the seal, you've got it, and you move forward with your project with that in the background, and that with the seal in place, strategics will be very interested in the conversation, because that is it's a light to. You've also got the. We move forward into all the different construction phases and all of those different phases. So the seal provides the basis, and then you're into environmental approvals, permitting, and all the natural things that you have to go through to get the project moving forward. But seal will provide that basis.
Great, thank you. And then we have a question coming in from John A. The last name is there. Steve, would like to comment on the ASX. The question was, will the ASX listing be delayed until after the sale news in July?
No. We think that the news is very positive. That will be seen, or Chile will be seen as wanting to develop the lithium industry very, very strong. People will see that we are the most developed company in Chile. Our time frame is still to complete the prospectus, including the technical assessment report, and file that at the end of April. With the ASX then requiring a few weeks of review, we would expect to be trading in May. And I think that the position that we have with the company will be received very positively in Australia. I think the biggest concern that most potential investors had is they didn't see clarity in the process. Everybody we've spoken to in Australia liked Chile as an investment destination, but the lack of clarity on the sale, and in particular, whether the government were going to be wanting to take majority of every single project. That's all been clarified. They said absolutely no. Private companies like CTL can go 100% alone on these 26 salars that have been identified for private development. So I think
would you look to try and make an application on the other 26?
Well, at the moment we've got two to develop, and I think our hands are fairly full with those two at the moment.
Fair enough.
We did ask the question, Daniel, but I think the answer was straight. I think we got enough on our plate already. I
just think, if you're getting offers from KfW, it's always the ability to finance is actually sort of half the risk in all these things. I mean, we know we have the product. We've got more than enough to run a 20,000 or 40,000 ton or 20,000 euro ton projects for a meaningful period of time. But I think a lot of these other companies are going to struggle in bringing together that financing package to move forward. So if you're getting all those relationships, it becomes an interesting proposition. So Steve was asking again, Steve, a KfW deal, when would you be able to announce a deal like this and what quarter? And I think, again,
next year,
jumping in, it would something that would be after the sales, after the PFS, and when you've got the product going out to a number of partners, it would be something that, again, Gordon, you're saying, what sort of probably early next year is when you start to seriously look at the financing package.
Right, Steve.
It would actually be later than the way it works is whilst we are having finished the PFS. That gets entry in the door with the various financing entities and strategic partners. We will then have those discussions and lead up to the expression of interest of those financing institutions to be part of the financing package. But they will always be non-binding, and they will only become effective once the company has been able to deliver a satisfactory positive DFS. It has the environmental permits in place as well as the sale in place. So you put all the financing together. This is the group that you're asking to finance, they want to finance, but it doesn't become definitive until you've met the preconditions.
And that's the same, Daniel, with the announcement Vulcan and the EIB. That'll be subject to various different clauses. They've been offered the money and they've announced it, but it's subject to
conditions, precedents, etc. Understood. Thank you very much, Clary. And then the last one we have today, and I think we're actually going to make it bang on the hour this time. Well done, guys. Toby, I was just asking, do we need a separate permit to commercialize the extracted lithium as well as a seal?
That is the permit. The sale is the permit that permits you to extract and sell the lithium.
Yeah.
So backing up, gentlemen, and taking it in the round. Next key step is we got clarity for the sales. We're hoping that we'll get resubmitted clarification by July, and then a couple of months after that, we actually get them. There will be in the summer, we'll be getting drilling updates from this season's drilling works. That will then feed into the PFS that we expect in around about September. That should then lead into going into the DFS, and then early next year, we start then talking about offtake partners and the financing packaging. And then, Steve, in your mind, where would that put you in terms of then being able to then close a financing package, begin construction, and then get into first production?
I think the key rate determining step is going to be the environmental permits. We will have the DFS. We believe middle of next year. We will have the sale. We expect to file the EIA at the end of this year, but then there is the process of review with government. And the reality in Chile, a lot of mining projects has taken quite a long time for those permits to be approved, and the mining companies have really kicked back at government at taking excessive time. In my original day with Collahuasi, the government approval time frame was law, they had to respond within 6 months, but that is no longer the case. But what President Boric said last year is they are looking to streamline the environmental permitting process, make things happen much more efficiently. And if Finance Minister Marcel is to be heard, what he said a few weeks ago, the government want to see 3 or 4 projects in production or active development by 2026. The only way that's going to happen if the government is very efficient and gets the environmental permits approved promptly.
And another thing as well, just to remind people, the work that Aldo and his team have done in Chile with the local communities has been quite remarkable. I mean, we've got them drafting bits of the EIA related to their areas and so on. I don't think that's ever happened before. They're drafting, they'll have their fingerprints on the EIA. So when that goes in, you're effectively taking out 6 to 9 months of Indigenous community review because they've been involved. And I don't think, I think actually it may even be a first in the world, this. Queensland University, who we work with on sustainability, have not seen this before. So I think Aldo's done a great job. So we've been trying to look ahead as to what can we do to plan ahead that will move the project forward as fast as possible. CL approval, Indigenous communities, EIA, Indigenous communities, and we're working alongside them, and it helps the process and hopefully speeds it up.
Brilliant. Well, gentlemen, thank you very, very much. We're 1 minute over. I think that's been extremely informative and enlightening, certainly for me, and I'm sure for many of our shareholders and the interested parties who are listening and watching this evening. To everybody else, we will be getting a copy of this within a couple of hours. Certainly the company will put it out on Telegram first thing in the morning, onto their Twitter and to the company's website. I'm sure one of you, if not me, will be posting it onto the Telegram group, and then I will be sending it out to investors as well. Almost everybody here is shareholders. So the company is doing a lot of work in terms of talking to potential parties who we think we can present the company to, and think we've got an awful lot of very positive news flow here, and we think the company is incredibly cheap. But those funds are larger institutions that want to come in, and it will take some time to consider, and they come in for chunky amounts, and really at our current market cap, we're below the threshold. So really, for us to drive the share price up, it's individuals, it's people like everybody here that's listening. And I would encourage everybody who likes what they hear and believes in the story and believes in their shareholding to please forward out the Telegram link to other potential parties, and to take this and maybe some of the previous ones and send it into other acquaintances, friends, colleagues. The more people that we can get onto the shareholder register, and the deeper and broader our shareholder base, the better it will be for all the constituent parts, and the easier it is for us to help grow and develop the company to the potential that we all think that it has. And with that, I'd like to thank Steve and Gordon again for their time, and we'll be back again in 2 weeks with Aldo next time. So we'll look forward to that. Thank you very much, everybody, and good night.
Thanks, Daniel.
Okay,
That's
thanks,
great.
Dan.
Daniel, Gordon, Steve, thank you very much indeed. Can I please ask investors not to close this session, as we'll now automatically redirect you for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. It's only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure it'll be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Cleantech Lithium PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation, and good evening to you all.